Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is July 10th, 2018. And today's title is What's Up with India's Soaring Demand and a Big Indian Announcement. We're going to be talking about some very interesting developments in the Indian silver market and also covering a very big a very big announcement related to that demand. First, let's take a look at what happened during the day. Well, last night, Brett Kavanaugh was nominated by President Trump to be the next Supreme Court Justice to replace Anthony Kennedy. It looks like he will have probably a pretty easy time getting confirmed. Looks like the votes are there. It's also interesting that people like Jeb Bush, George Bush are also supporting his nomination, and it seems that the Republicans will support it, and perhaps even a few Democrats, because remember, 4 Democrats did vote for Neil Gorsuch to be Supreme Court Justice. So I think the reason he picked Brett Kavanaugh is he did not want to run up against any resistance with someone like Amy Coney Barrett, who is a very outspoken person on abortion, and I think he's probably waiting to save that nomination till after the midterm elections, because it doesn't look like the Democrats will take the Senate. They have to defend, I think, 10 seats. There's a couple of seats they might even lose, where Trump had won in 2016, and it's possible the Republicans might even pick up a seat or two. If that were the case, then Trump will have nominated and gotten through Kavanaugh, keeping the 5-4 majority, and then he can probably push a more conservative justice to get the 6-3 majority if and when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg retires. Now, it's also possible, no one's talking about this, but that Clarence Thomas is also getting up there in age, and he may also resign, and that may just be a replacement. So it's possible Trump may get to name another 2 or 3 judges within this presidential term. He's already named, I believe, about 22, 23 justices to the lower court, the district courts, and the courts of appeals. And he's got some pending in the 9th and 11th circuits, and I think he's got about 1/3 of all judges. So it's pretty much a pretty big remaking of the court, quite dramatic for someone who's only been in office for 15, 16 months. All right, what else? Oh, we have to check the gold and crypto prices, that's right. Silver closed down today under the psychological $16 barrier. It had been up as high. It opened at 16.10. It did fall down to about 1588, and it closed at about 1595, 1596. Gold did about the same thing. Gold at one point had fallen down to about 1247, 1248. It opened at 1258, and it rebounded fairly nicely to about 1255. So both gold and silver struggling with their psychological marks of $12.50 and $16. Cryptos, the price movement was a bit more pronounced in that they fell, and I think Bitcoin fell to almost 6,300. It's at 6,336 right now. Ethereum fell down to 430. It's at 434 right now. Bitcoin Cash fell under 700 to 690, and Litecoin fell almost to $75 and is now at 76.37. There were some comments, I think, from Nobel Prize winner Joseph Stiglitz, basically saying that the authorities are going to put the hammer on Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and he brought out the old argument that they're not good for anything other than laundering money. And the reason that Nobel Prize winners don't like cryptocurrencies is that it basically puts them out of a job, because when you're trying to develop theories on monetary policy. Well, it all has to do with how monies flow from central banks. Cryptocurrencies, you don't have any influence over that. So clearly you're not going to win a Nobel Prize on monetary policy if cryptocurrencies become prevalent. All right, let's take a look now at today's top story. What's up with India's... before I get to that, what's up with India's soaring silver demand and a big Indian announcement? If you had ordered mugs, small gold mugs, either the classic or the super classic mug, they were delivered today, and you also would have received your tracking number for your mug. So they should arrive in a few days. I'll try to send out orders as I receive them, but I may wait to get a few more and do them every other day. I'm also going to do mini muggages. You know, I have mini mintages. Well, we're going to do different designs of the mugs. So the mugs that you see now may not be available once they sell out. We will probably change the design around and we'll have mini muggages. All right, let's take a look now at our story of the evening. What's up with India's soaring silver demand and a big silver announcement? Yesterday we talked about solar demand, and I tried to temper people's enthusiasm about how thrifting would lead to lower amounts of silver used per silver panel, and therefore not to expect, just because solar demand may double or triple or quadruple in the coming years, that therefore a corresponding amount of silver would be required, and then silver would be set to skyrocket because there'd be no silver left, because everyone would be using up all the silver to make silver panels. Now, we saw from the Silver Institute that due to thrifting, we're only going to get a modest increase, projected increase in silver demand based on solar demand, because of the concept of thrifting, substituting other metals for silver, and just basically using less silver. However, there's still some very interesting developments in the silver market, the solar market, and the electronic markets as they and with respect to silver. The other thing I mentioned the other evening was that while people also try to hang their hat on increased silver demand because of electronics, I noted that since 2010, silver demand for electronics is also down from about 310 million ounces to about 230 million ounces between 2010 and 2017. However, there are case scenarios, and India is at the center of this, where silver demand will rise based on electronics and based on solar and based on general Indian silver jewelry and Indian silverware demand. Let's get a quick look at India. Now, India's got a population of about 1.2 million, and it is historically known as a gold-loving country. You always hear about Indian gold, Diwali, all of the culture based around gold, buying of gold for gifts, for weddings, to store, rural farmers counting on a monsoon to get their crops and to have extra rupees so they can buy gold. And the Indian government has always been against this, not always, but recently been against it, because India has no gold mining in the country, and therefore it has to import a significant amount of gold to meet its demand. Now, there's a lot of gold in India, but when people aren't selling it, they're not just hoarding it, there's not a secondary source then, they have to import large amounts. And that screws up their balance of trade, because sometimes 9, 10, 15% of their overall imports are gold. So India does what any government would do, is they put tariffs on the gold, 10% duty. They even try to prevent people from wanting it once it gets in the country by putting another goods and services tax on it. They've been working on trying to have pay interest on gold so people turn it in. They have this gold monetization plan where the Indian government gives you a bond in exchange for your gold. You get interest. People aren't buying it. Some of the temples have lent some of their gold, but it has been a pretty big failure so far, and they've been at it for about 3 years. They're also trying to get younger Indians into digital gold through buying gold on your phone, and similar to things like gold money. And silver has been somewhat of a beneficiary of all this clamping down on gold, not because silver is viewed as a substitute for gold in India. That's not the case, but because the middle class has additional cash and they're buying silverware because they can. Also, India is one of the world's largest proponents of solar energy, and they've already built the world's largest solar energy plant, and they're looking to build more. And the president or prime minister Modi is a very big proponent of solar power, and he's part of this international solar agreement with 121 countries, really working to push solar energy. And India also has a lot of rural places that are not served by a grid, so solar may not be the best thing in those areas. Of course, India has a lot of concentrated cities where a lot of people are, so it does make sense. But they also promote the use of these solar ovens instead of them deforesting the area and cooking with wood. So there's a big demand for solar-based products in India, and India has been importing a lot of silver. We're going to get to some of the numbers in a minute, and they're starting to become eye-opening again when we get to take a look at those. But before we do, let me tell you about this big announcement in India that happened. When did it come out? Came out July 9th. Now, keep in mind, this against the backdrop of tariffs, U.S.-Chinese relationships, and overall electronics demand. Now, we don't anticipate that electronics demand is going to go down. We spoke earlier how you might use less silver in electronics, but not that there's going to be a decrease in demand in electronics. Here's the announcement. Samsung opens world's largest phone factory in India, according to Reuters. Now, in this story, they're saying Samsung has formally opened a new factory in India, which is the world's biggest phone manufacturing plant, and it's part of their plans to expand. So India is going to have the world's largest phone factory, and they already have built the world's largest solar panel. What do you call it? It's called a, it's not a device, a facility. It's the world's largest solar panel facility in India. They have the world's largest one there. Okay, so Prime Minister Modi was involved with the president of South Korea, Moon Jae-in, and to promote this partnership between Samsung and the Indian government. And it's partially to compete with China, which also was is heavily involved in the China's company called XIAOMI. So it looks like India will be a big electronics player and a big solar player. Now let's see how that ties into their silver demand. Silver, like gold in India, has to be imported. Now they do have some silver mines in India, but still they have virtually no gold mines in India, and they have, I think they do about 50 million ounces a year. It's a small amount. It's not that much, but they import massive amounts. Now, back in 2015, in 2014, when the price of silver was heading towards its multi-year bottoms, Indians were buying it up. And part of that was for solar demand. Part of it was just because the Indian economy was doing better. But one thing you can see with the Indian demand for gold and silver, they are price sensitive. When the price goes down, they buy it. The price goes up, they put the brakes on. They say, hold on a minute. We'll wait for it to go back down again. They're unlike American traders who we were talking about or even just retail investors in America, gold and silver sales tend to stagnate when the price goes nowhere. If the price is low, like it is now, Indians will buy. When the price is low in America, Americans won't buy. They wait for it. They want it to drop further, or they want to see it start to move higher. They don't want to miss out on the way up, and they want to get a better bargain than there is now. They don't have the concept that looks like a good price now, it's at multi-year lows, I'll buy it. Let's take a look at some of the silver Indian import numbers. In 2014, Indian silver demand really took off on the imports. In 2012, they imported only 2,126 tons, and that's about 80 million ounces. By 2013, they were importing 6,100 tons, 2014, 7,100 tons, and 2015, 8,500 tons. And that stair-step higher corresponded with the stair-step lower in the price of silver. 2015, if you will recall, was the bottom of the nadir of the price of silver. By the end of the year, I think it had fallen to $13.81. As the prices rose in 2016, if you remember, all through the first half of the year until July after Brexit, Indians cut their purchases in a big way. So they went from 8,500 tons in 2015 to just 3,500. And then last year they did 5,300 tons, which is a decent amount. And that corresponds with the fact that the price basically fell back down. This year we had some decent price action in January and February, if you remember. We were well into the almost 18. We were at 17 something. And in January and February, the monthly silver imports weren't very high. So in November of 2017, December 2017, January 2018, February 2018, the numbers were about 340 tons. Not very much. But in April, now we've had low prices for basically starting in April. 902 tons of silver are imported into India. Now you say, I don't know what tons are. Give me ounces. 902 tons in 1 month equals approximately 29 million ounces of silver. Now, what does 29 million ounces of silver in 1 month mean? Well, the U.S. Mint in 2017 sold 18 million American Silver Eagles. So far more than an entire year's mintage of American Silver Eagles. There's only been about 6 or 7 years where the U.S. Mint sold more than 29 million American Silver Eagles in a given year. So in 1 month, India imported 29 million ounces. Now that's up nearly 50% from last April when they imported 606 tons. But if you go back now, if you look at a chart, and I'll produce these charts. I've already produced them. I'm looking at them myself. I'll put them up on the Smaulgld site. They're always there. There's actually a section where I keep the charts. I do a monthly update or a bi-monthly update, but then I just keep the charts separate, and you can go check those out as well. But they're only updated till February. These will be updated through March. There was a period through 2016 where the monthly numbers were a couple of hundred tons. They weren't very high. The 902 tons imported into India in April were the highest since December 2015. Now remember, that was the end of the period, 2015, end of 2014 to the end of 2015, when India was really importing massive amounts. They would import, I've got here 5 months where they imported over 1,000 tons. So now India looks like it's getting close to importing close to 1,000 tons again in April. We'll see where they come out in May, but I would expect this to continue because the prices are now bottoming in the upper 15s and low 16s and have been now for quite some time. They are well off the recent highs of $18, and they've been stagnating at 16. So India is back buying the silver. It makes sense for them to buy it. They're going to have the need for the solar. They're going to have the need for the electronics factory. world's largest mobile phone factory in the world. And of course, the India economy is still doing well, and Indians will continue to buy silverware, jewelry. Interesting, the world's silverware mostly is sold in India. 54 million ounces worth of silverware were sold last year, up from like 51 a few years ago. But think about that. 54 million ounces of silverware is more than the record year of 47 million American silver eagles. So if you look at India's silver demand, it is massive, because in that year, 2015, when I mentioned they sold 8,529 tons, that's 274 million ounces. That is an incredible amount. That's about 30% of the overall annual silver mining production in a given year. Also, if you look at and you compare 2013, 14, and 15 silver imports into India, those 3 years, it's about 700 million ounces. That's more than 32 years worth of American silver eagles. So India is clearly has a historic need for silver, is developing a taste for it in jewelry. As Indian households get wealthier, they are going to buy silverware. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I wouldn't be surprised if Americans culturally go back to silverware if the price stays in a range. Silverware is actually good for you to use. It's antibacterial. It's elegant. It's not that expensive. But people, I think it would be a good business opportunity if someone would start making silverware sets to sell for people's weddings and other gifts, anniversaries, and so on. I mentioned that my parents had received a silver set in 1950s. I think they sold it in 1980 when the price went to $50, which a lot of people did. They sold their silver, so there's not much even silverware in the United States, probably other loose pieces here and there. So that's it for India. I think that we're going to see and continue to see Indian silver demand move higher. Also, I noticed that U.S. mint sales are starting to pick up the last 2 months, more so in gold. But generally what happens is when the sales pick up, they pick up first in gold, and just like the price, and then they pick up a bit in silver. So I'll keep an eye on that. All right, we're going to take a look at the comments. One of the things I have to mention, we've been getting a lot of comments lately, and I haven't been able to get through all of them. Some of the comments I'm going to have to pass through. Sometimes they're just straight comments. Sometimes they're jokes. But well, let's see what comments we have here. Bitcoin is crashing. Okay, we're not covering Bitcoin tonight. Hello. Oh, we don't have many comments tonight. All right, we got a lot of people watching, but not many comments. All right. DW, if we drop into repression, guess that means recession. Do you see the U.S. banks do a bail-in if the Fed doesn't bail out the banks this time? Well, I don't think it matters whether we have a recession or not. It's whether the banks are not solvent. And I would think that they would not do a bailout of the banks, and that they would probably try some type of bail-in that has been discussed in the past. But I think more likely we wouldn't see bank failures in the U.S. We would just have a recession. But I would think that that is a risk. I would think that it would strain the FDIC. And then again, it depends on who's president, who's lobbying for what to happen, what the reaction is, what they think the systemic risk is. They may talk a tough game about how they wouldn't bail out banks just to get people to think that they're not going to, but they might. But then again, it was interesting how they did allow bail-ins to happen in Cyprus. But let's consider this. Cyprus, if you recall, had a very large number of Russian oligarchs that had their money there. And when they finally did the bail-in, they got hosed. They didn't get their money. So it's possible that if there had been more Europeans holding money in the Cypriot banks, that they wouldn't have gone to the bail-in and they might have gotten a bailout. So I can't say for sure that they're all agreed that if there's an issue, they're going to do bail-ins. That may just be some type of talk, or it just could be they don't have. The reason I think that bail-ins make sense if you're going to do this kind of fiat system is they can just print up the money, so I don't see why they wouldn't do it. They're already on fractional reserve. You lose confidence in the banking system when you do a bail-in. Most people don't know there's inflationary impact if you just print up the money and stick it in the account. They're just happy enough to get it. So I would guess in the United States or anywhere, the bail-in will probably only happen for the largest customers that are outside the insurance amounts. But it'd be hard to see, absent a special case, them not bailing out the banks, because that's part and parcel of their whole existence, is keeping confidence in the banks. After they had what got people to put money back in the banks in the 30s was they came up with all these plans of FDIC and designed to make people feel comfortable put the money back in after the banks crashed and shut down. Today, there's probably other places to go if the banking system doesn't make good on their promise to pay you your money. I mean, there are alternative trading platforms. They're not that large right now, but there are cryptocurrencies. There are gold trading. There's going to be, in the next couple of years, even more money traded in gold-backed cryptocurrencies. You have gold money, Bullion vault. You do have alternatives today that you didn't have back then. So I would imagine that, depending on the circumstances, that they would do everything they could to bail out before they went for a bail-in. Database DNA. If Indians buy low and Americans buy high, isn't that an example of people in one part of the world being smarter than stupid Americans? No, I think it's cultural. It may, actually economically, it may make sense. But also, you got to take your economics where you find them. In the U.S., people make money on momentum trading. So think that through. If an American is going to make money, they don't want to buy an asset that's just sitting at a particular point. If you buy at 16, and then it's at 1620, and then it's at 1595, and then it's at 1605, and then it's at 1585, there's no money to be made trading that, and it's not going anywhere. So in a sense, an American cultural will say that's dead money. And in that culture, that's smart. You don't put capital into dead money. Now, if indeed Indians like to buy low, sell high traditionally, and they have a longer term outlook, then buying low when it's sitting there, they might view that as a gift and a time to accumulate. So I don't know if it's a question of Indians are smarter than Americans. They like silver. Or Chinese are smart. They like gold. Americans are stupid. They don't understand gold. I don't think so. I think you take your culture and you adapt your intelligence to your culture. And if you're in a culture that's trade, now you can criticize the culture and say, well, Americans are short-term thinkers. Okay. And, the Chinese think centuries ahead, whatever. But that's not the same thing as someone being smarter than somebody else. That's just how people adapt to their economies and their cultures. Thanks for the answer. Got 3. But no, I mean, when you're typing on YouTube, it's no big deal. You always make mistakes. I make mistakes mumbling on here often too. All right. Database DNA. The pumpers need to get on board with the silverware demand in India story. There's a lot more demand than yoga pants. Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised because I just did another interview where I was talking about how a wealthy society buys gold and silver. That gold and silver isn't always bought for the collapse. And I think the pumpers should get into those stories because there's more demand right now for jewelry and silverware than there is for investment gold bars on either gold or silver. The demand is clearly for in India and China, which are becoming wealthier, they're buying gold and silver jewelry and silverware. They're not stacking. And I had on a guest, and he lived in China. He says they buy a lot of this commemorative type gold. They buy gold trinkets. But when I say trinkets, I don't mean knickknacks. I mean things made of gold that you actually pay a much higher price over spot. So they're not like trying to buy, according to him, he was saying they're not trying to buy gold as close to spot with, you know, just typical bullion. They're buying interesting items made of gold, or interesting items made of silver, or jewelry, or necklaces, rings, and so on, or statues, things like that. So it's not so much to stack for the apocalypse, but more to buy stuff that when you have a little money, disposable income. I mean, if you're starving, you don't buy a gold statue or a silver statue or a gold necklace. And that's what's happening in India and China. They have more money, so they're buying those things. How about Indians are smart because they know about the health benefits of silverware, or Americans love plastic utensils? I don't think the Indians know about the health benefits of silverware any more than Americans do. But again, there you go with the culture. You're right, because Americans have a throwaway society mentality, perhaps, and that's why there's a lot of plastic silverware. And now they're eliminating straw. You know, that is a Western trait, but that's a modern trait, to use a lot of throwaway items. DW, I like to buy it as close to spot as possible. Yes. Now, when somebody is buying as close to spot as possible, that is a stacker mentality. You're buying because you're trying to preserve your wealth. You're buying because you are concerned about the future, and you want to get as many ounces as possible before anything happens. But if you're buying because you have extra money, and you want to buy a little Buddha statue or Ganesha statue, whatever it is, in India, you're not buying for the same reason. You see an expensive item and you think, oh, well, I make some money. I can buy that item, so I'm going to buy it. And that's where the bulk of the demand comes from. It's not coming from people trying to get the difference between 59 cents over spot and 29 cents over spot. And I think it's the same in America with jewelry. If you look at the premiums on jewelry, they're crazy. I mean, you buy a gold ring, the price you're paying for the design, the forgery, the markup, the jeweler, you're probably paying for gold $3,000-4,000 an ounce when you buy gold jewelry. And the same with silver. You're not paying $16-17. You're probably paying $30-40-50 an ounce for silver when you buy even standard looking silver jewelry. ND, I think Americans will end up using hemp as utensils once hemp gets past the car. I thought it did. I thought that the hemp thing did pass. Although hemp is, I know you can make a lot of sturdy things out of hemp, but I'm not sure you would use, maybe I don't know, that you would use hemp utensils, because I would think that they might degrade a bit because they are of organic material. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me this evening. And yep, there's many. You know, I was prepared tonight to have to not to edit, but to have to sift through the comments, but I was able to hit all of them. Oh, ND, that was only the Senate. All they need is House and President to sign it. I thought normally it starts at the House and then goes to the Senate and then the President signed it. Maybe it was the other way around, because usually it's a spending bill, originates the House, goes to the Senate. So, okay, but thanks for clearing it up. So it's only one house of the Congress has passed it, and then we'll see. There's really no reason not to pass that bill other than some other lobby not wanting it, because it's got nothing to do with drugs. Hemp, George Washington grew hemp, apparently. It's just a sturdy crop that could be used to make rope, and very useful. You know, there's probably a hemp society. Hemp is the most useful thing in our lives. We can't live without hemp. There's probably one of those computer-generated stories, just like there is with silver, and you could probably sell hemp stocks on that, which is different than marijuana stocks. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We will see you again tomorrow night at this time. And also, I will have up those charts that we discussed so that I can show them to you now. But you'll see those Indian silver charts. And we should have May numbers in a few weeks, and I will report on those. But I expect this trend to continue as long as the price stays low. And when the price stays low, you do get you get this Indian and Chinese floor, because they do increase their buying when the price gets down this low. And if history is any guide, what happened in 2015, that was the low. And then we saw some pretty decent moves from about 1381 all the way, just in a few short months, into 2016, all the way over $21. So you could see that kind of move if we see another 3 or 4 months of sustained buying, and that's only if history repeats itself. You never know. But thank you very much for listening.